go ahead and get started. Just to let you guys know, there will be a certificate that is going out to all participants at the end of the webinar. In there, you'll find also the handout which Julia has compiled for us, with lots of really great information in there, some fantastic links to some extra kind of references and information about the topic today. So do look out for that. If you have any problems finding that in your inbox, just send us a message there to formazione@mlaworld.com, and we'll make sure we send that one back out to you. So today, as we celebrate the diversity of learners, it's really crucial to recognize and address the unique needs of those with dyslexia. And what does it actually mean to learn with dyslexia? Today, we'll delve into 4 key learning strategies designed to meet the unique needs of students with dyslexia, and aim to give a comprehensive idea about what it means to learn with dyslexia. Through a few simple changes, it's possible to make the classroom inclusive and empower students. Now, inclusive and empower students, meaning include all students. The stuff we're talking about today just focus on students with dyslexia, but they're really beneficial for all learners. Okay, so now I'm going to hand across to Julia.
Hello everyone. Today I wanted to talk about dyslexia, and when hearing the word dyslexia, the first thing I think that comes to mind is difficulty with reading, right? So there are many reasons why a child may be seen to struggle to learn to read, but a large percentage of these children will have difficulty as a result of the specific learning disability of which dyslexia is the most common. It mainly affects reading, spelling, and writing. And in today's webinar, I will briefly talk about this language learning difficulty, dyslexia. Then I will show how I usually adapt materials for my classroom to be inclusive. And also I will share some teaching techniques that I use to deliver new information or to revise already studied concepts. Catherine, can you please share the webinar with me? I can't see it on my screen. Right, thank you. So I'll ask you to be my student, and let's imagine you are a student with a specific learning disability, and we are in a mainstream classroom. So I will ask you to take some notes. So you will need a piece of paper and a pen.
Okay, I'm ready. I have a paper.
No computer used, because that's the saying about the mainstream classroom, that no computers are allowed. And I'll ask you again, as I said before, to write down some sentences, but instead of letters A, S, and E, I'll ask you to write this following symbols as U with apostrophe, $sign, and capital E.
Okay.
Right. Just a second. Right. Okay. Dyslexia is a specific learning disability that is neurobiological in origin. It is characterized by difficulties with accurate and fluent word recognition, and by poor spelling and decoding abilities.
Okay, I'm gonna need you to repeat the first sentence again,
that
please.
Is the problem, right, with taking notes with dyslexia, because I'm using the pace I should use at the level A2, B1, B2 especially, right? So that is middle school, high school. And let's try again. What do you think?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Dyslexia is a specific learning disability that is neurobiological in origin. It's characterized by difficulties with accurate and fluent word recognition and by poor spelling and decoding abilities.
Whoa, time out.
Right, so how does it feel?
Overwhelming.
Frustrating not to catch up? Have you managed to write everything down in this
Oh
time?
gosh, I got 1, 2, 3, 4. I got 6 words. Do you let us know how you got on with this exercise?
Was it easy to concentrate on the meaning? So how about the comprehension at this point? Can you tell me what you've written? Without reading, of course.
Yeah, I certainly wasn't focused on the meaning of the sentences.
So that is
I was focusing on the spelling.
Exactly. So that is how our students with an SPLD feel. They have to think about the symbol, right? The graphic symbol of the sound they are writing. And while they are doing that, they are not thinking only about symbols, but they have to put these symbols into words and words in sentences. And as you know, we are doing these things automatically, whereas our dyslexic students need some help, right? So if you can share also the slide with the alphabet, so that is how some of our students can see letters, right? Or in that video, the short video of the text, right? It's how sometimes the letters can, if we go back a little bit, so how letters change position, right? So you see, and sometimes sentences can kind of moving or overlapping. So it becomes hard for our students to read, especially aloud, right? So going to the next slide, we can talk about dyslexia as a neurobiological problem, right? That is characterized by difficulties with accurate and fluent word recognition. So this is our behavior level, right? And as a consequence, by poor spelling and decoding abilities. This deficit in the phonological component of language is unexpected in relation to other cognitive abilities. So it doesn't influence their cognitive level, right? But the provision of effective classroom instruction can help our learners. So some secondary consequences, they may include the reading comprehension, as you noticed right before in the exercise, and the reduced reading experience that can impede growth of vocabulary and background knowledge as a consequence, right? So students with dyslexia require special strategies regarding language acquisition and literacy. In the next slide, we can see the most, let's say, obvious problems that our learners with learning difficulties face. So sometimes they struggle with fluent, accurate reading. They have difficulties with copying words to work from the board. They need support with handwriting. Sometimes it's impossible to understand what they've written down, and of course the notes they take are not, of course, legible at home, right? So they cannot go back to the information they've taken during the lesson hour, and that is why there is also a gap with that. So they need to be able to, so we need to give them an instrument how to take notes
in order to help them revise.
Exactly. So also, I would say also to other students, we're not taking much notes nowadays, right? So we need to give them, to all our students, like an instrument, but the dyslexic students will benefit mostly from that kind of instruction, right? And they are most likely to struggle with phonological awareness, especially at the phonemic level. So the sound letter correspondence. Right. If talking about approaches and some methods for dyslexic language learners, one of the most popular is the multisensory structured learning approach, which was developed by Sparks, who based on the dyslexia remedial program of Gillingham and Stillman. And Gillingham and Stillman, in their turn, used the Orton work, who was one of the first researchers to devise a systematic reading approach for dyslexic students. This approach gives the children explicit indirect teaching and sound letter correspondence and activates through the activation of different sensory channels, mostly auditory, visual, and kinesthetic. This approach proceeds in highly structured cumulative steps and provides dyslexic learners with sufficient practice and revision opportunities. There are a lot of other approaches, but they are all based on Orton-Gillingham approach of multisensory teaching. So what is
do you think that's one of the most, do you think that's one of the most important things when we're talking about dyslexic learners, is giving them all these different channels for them to engage with the material?
To engage, and what is more important, to process and to commit it to the long-term memory, the information, all right? Both on the phonological level, on the building on the knowledge of vocabulary, so and grammar, and from words, making sentences and engaging and using that information and engage in conversation, do exercises, and to be a usual student in a classroom. So with the help of this approach, we can use the sound system, the spelling system, vocabulary, and grammar structure. Why we need to incorporate this approach, which is not really difficult. I will give you an example in a second. It just sounds maybe too scary, but what is the main difficulty for our dyslexic students is the encoding verbally presented information. So if I just explain something verbally, it is a big problem for our students because of the capacity of their short-term memory. And then, of course, encoding this information is a long-term memory. So when, for example, we learn a word, I can show you a picture, right? Imagine you are my student, Catherine. So if I show you a picture, what kind of channel do I activate? What do you think?
Visual.
Visual, exactly. Then I ask you to repeat the word several times. Here we're talking about
auditory.
Auditory, exactly. Then, for example, when we take notes, we can ask our students to draw a picture next to the word, if possible, of course. So we are again using our visual channel, exactly. And we can act it out or mime. It's our
kinesthetic.
Kinesthetic, exactly. So that's basically that's the multi-structured sensory approach.
Right. And I mean, when we use this type of approach, as we were saying before, I'm sure it's beneficial to all the students in the classroom. And so, you know, we're really making the classroom inclusive for those students by making these small little changes, but it benefits all of them. I'm sure, you know, as a language learner myself, it would help me, especially with the recall of vocabulary or learning new vocabulary, to do it this way.
Yeah, not only vocabulary, also grammar. We will have a look at it further in the webinar. But what I can say that adapting a little bit your way of learning makes it enjoyable and memorable to students, right? So as you said before, it's engaging, and so
what helps, you know, kind of pass it into long-term memory.
That's true. Let's talk about material for a second, right? So this is again the basic principle of it's visual, auditory, tactile, and kinesthetic, right? So we said it's carefully structured. We use a lot of revision. We will talk about it a little bit later. Good. Now, let's talk about friendly material, okay? This webinar is too short to cover all the points we should know about our students with learning difficulties, but I can't help but mention the importance of the way the material is presented to students. Because our dyslexic students are very sensitive and they perceive the world slightly different. If we talk about the physical environment of the classroom, the curriculum, the classroom management. So that is why, if possible, when we create material, it's important to choose the right font. So can you show me the examples? Yeah, they are called dyslexia-friendly fonts, Comic Sans, Century Gothic, Open Dyslexic. It's important that our font doesn't have any serifs. These are curly additions to letters. And it's important not to use too many bright pictures to embellish the page. You have really nice examples here on the slide with like one picture that maybe somehow recalls to the topic, but it's not overwhelmed, right, with information. It doesn't create any sensory overload or visual disturbance to the eyes, right, of our students.
Could you tell us more about the importance of pastel colors?
Exactly. So if, probably we are used to, using white paper and the black font on it, right, the black writing, but actually our dyslexic students are too sensitive to the contrast that black text can create on the white background. So that is why pastel colored paper is more beneficial for our learners. It's usually, it's accessible in any supermarket or store. You can buy a stationery, right? So it's just, a choice of paper and nothing to, okay?
Would you say they're kind of sensitive to those very strongly contrasting colors?
You mean, well, color coding, if we're talking about using colors when teaching, it's one thing, but it's better not to use different fonts on one in one text. What many teachers like doing to maybe to vary the information that is written. It's preferable to use simple plain text with the font between 14, 16 points and double spacing between the lines, because it's easier for the dyslexic learners to track thicker lines, and when this spacing helps the sentences not to merge or overlap while reading. Okay. Right, so we align instructions left, as it's done usually in course books. So that's the example. And we can highlight essential information, but again, we're not overdoing it. All right. Of course, we cannot reprint all the course books, right? We possess. It's impossible, right? So there is another easier and cheap way to minimize distractors, because today's books are very similar to magazine style. They use bright, glossy pages, right, with very busy pages, right, which are cluttered with pictures. So it can be very confusing for student with processing difficulties. So one option is to make a text window, which is cutting out a hole in a piece of paper. And when we place this piece of paper over a text, it blocks out the unnecessary information and allows the students to focus on the piece of text we need to work with. And we can also create a more flexible text window by using two L-shaped pieces of paper as an example. So we can slit them apart and change the side of this window we need to work with. All right. So here, as you can see, is an example.
And something really easy that we can do in the classroom. All we need is some nice pastel-colored paper.
That's true. I used it in color on purpose, first because I wanted you, of course, to see it on the slide. But secondly, you do it once and you hand it out to your students, and they keep it in their book. Or if you need something handy, you just take a small piece of paper and ask the students follow the lines going down line by line. This with a piece of paper, it also helps to concentrate on what they are reading.
Mm-hmm.
And another way to present material is mind mapping. Students with dyslexia have this unique ability to see the overall picture, right? So they think holistically. They miss details, but they see everything as a photograph, right? So mind mapping is actually a good tool to present information to all students, right? It can be both new information we need to remember or the information for the revision, right? So let's have a look at some tips on how to make a good mind map, right? So we turn the page, right, sideways. We start in the center of the picture of the page, right? In the center, we usually put a picture. We use an image for the central idea. Then we can use colors, of course. It's really important. And we can use many branches that we connect to the central image, and then our secondary and third level branches to other ideas, right? And levels, etc. It's important to make our branches curved. And what is the most important is to use one keyword per line. Okay, so we don't just copy sentences, otherwise it's too much information to process, and the mind map should be kind of, again, a photograph, so for our student to refer to and to recall the information needed, right? So
yeah, I think you said something important when you said good mind mapping. And I've seen, yes, I'm sure all of us have as teachers, seen millions and millions of mind maps, but they're kind of rendered useless when big chunks of language are just copied and pasted across. In that I see, a student trying very hard to make a mind map for revision, but then writing these long paragraphs that also connect with other paragraphs around the mind map, and it's not effective. And so I think that's really important, as you said, kind of like having this guideline and understanding, why we use them and what one single word can signify when we talk about recalling information.
Exactly. Can you please show us the next slide? So as you can see here, I think it's an example of a good mind map. So let's recall the information. So we start with, can you help me please? So we start with
an image in the middle.
Exactly. So we turn the page, right, sideways. We start with the picture. Yes. So as you can see, we have learners as the focus of our mind map. Then what about the lines?
Right? The branches are curved instead of straight.
Exactly. And we use what? We use colors, right? For the
It's color
branching.
coded, yeah.
Exactly. And what is the most important is we use one keyword, 2 words, but no more for our mind map. All right.
I like that this mind map is helping us with this topic as well. It's very much based on, of course, you know, dyslexic learners. It's a nice thing for us teachers. I think I'll take this and use it when I'm making materials for my dyslexic learners.
Exactly. It's another example how we can record information, review, make notes instead of writing texts. We can use grids and chains. For example, when we need to we read, I don't know, we read a story at home and we need to write the sequence of events, right? So we can use a similar chain. Or, for example, when we need to pre-teach some vocabulary on a topic, or we need to prepare our learners for a reading text or for a listening text, so we can use mind maps as well. It's very effective.
These are great things to be using in the classroom with all learners. I love these chains, and they're particularly useful when we want someone to kind of summarize an article or as you said, a story, because it's forcing them to kind of engage with the let's say the article and understand how the article's coherent and how it's planned. And I just think that's great, you know. And you know, as well as that, if we're asking them to summarize it, they're forced here just to use a few words, and they can't do this kind of copy and paste of these long sentences or paragraphs.
And I think what is the most important, it's not time consuming, and it doesn't require any extra preparation or material. It's not so it's just a pen and a piece of paper. I don't know, we can make a mind map on the board, on the interactive board. So I think it's a really effective and useless tool.
Mm-hmm. Even as an assessment tool. Yeah. Absolutely. As an assessment tool, if we're finishing a reading and we're asking them to summarize in such a, you know, brief way as this, it's very easy for the teacher to understand which students have fully comprehended the article or reading or story by using one of these chains or mind maps.
That's right. Here we're going to talk about multisensory approach in teaching grammar. Okay. So what is the most important when teaching grammar is that we need to teach grammar explicitly. That means we need to explain the rules and how the sentences are built in order for our students to understand. So they need to receive clear and concise explanation. It's helpful if the grammar is presented in context and the structures are related to their communicative functions. We can use color coding. It's a very, as we said before, we use colors not only in mind maps, but also in grammar. The most important is we should use color coding from, let's say, from day one. So we teach our student that we use, for example, red for subject, blue for predicate, green for object, or for, I don't know, you can choose any color. You can agree with your students on colors, right? You can make sort of poster as a reminder what colors you use for what, right? And so with time, our students get used to the word order in sentences, and so we can start from simples to complex structures, from simple tenses to more complicated tenses, and we can also start removing, right, color coding from when we use like simple structures and implement color coding only when we need to explain something new, something more complicated. And so our students will learn easier, right? What we can also do is we can use interactive whiteboard activities, right, which are available online free of charge by a lot of websites. Also, in the handout I prepared for our participants today, they can find a lot of ideas.
Great.
What is also important is that we teach grammar from simple to complex structures, as I mentioned before, and we provide practice sessions to automatize these linguistic structures. So we can use drills, right, which is the best way to learn the necessary concept, right? And we proceed in small steps, right? As I said before, relying on already existing knowledge, right? And then adding new information. All right. So we talked before about mind maps. And here, when teaching grammar, we can also use timelines. It's a kind of tool that I rely a lot on because, again, it's really easy to draw on the board, on the whiteboard, and if needed, timelines are all available online as an example, so it's easy to find. Just Google it, and it gives this, again, multi-sensory technique, right, approach to it. So we use our visual channel, right, to encode information, remember information, and to explain to our learners. As well as on the right, you can see I use a lot of the so-called boxes. We can easily draw them, or we can, for example, do it on our computer and print it out for our students. It's visually more attractive to the eye, so our students remember easier, right, information, and it's easier even to take notes, to record. It's not wordy, so and not doesn't create this visual overload, right? And students not overwhelmed with the quantity of information they need to write down, right?
We spend so much time as well going back and revising the meaning and the form of grammar structures. And if students get used to seeing these nice timelines or the form presented in a certain way, they do kind of, like those who have photographic memories or really prefer that kind of visual representation, will record it that way. And I mean, it takes just a couple minutes to find these timelines and these things online. Once we have them there kind of downloaded on a computer, whatever, it's so easy just to use the leaves that we have to show them that quickly. We're reducing the time that you have to spend writing out the form on the whiteboard every
That's
time,
great.
just by showing them these things.
Exactly. Another technique we are going to talk today about is the metacognitive thinking skills. So it's literally about, so we teach our students how to think out loud as one of the possible solutions to facilitate learning, because our students with the NSPLD have difficulties to retrieve the information from their long-term memory. So they need working through the process each time. If, for example, an advanced learner takes a decision automatically, our learner with dyslexia find it harder to develop this automaticity. For example, choosing the right tense or an article, or if learning vocabulary, choosing the right word. So that is why we need to kind of walk through the steps with our students each time in the lesson, and it can be also beneficial for all learners, right? As a kind of practice, revision practice as well, or we can check where all our students make mistakes. So let me give you an example. This is a A2 level, right? So I try to choose the easiest example just to explain how to apply this metacognitive technique in any classroom. So as you can see here, one of the students made a mistake by missing out an article, right? So would you like apple, right? Can I have cheese, right? So what we can do is kind of ask a number of questions, right? And lead our students to the answer. So would you like apple? We ask our students, is it one apple or many? If many, how do we show that, right? So the students, we can help them. If they know, they already say it, like we do with as, so we add as to the word apple. If only one, how do we show one? So we use an article a. If we say a apple, doesn't sound all right. So can we say it a apple? No. So how can we how is it better to say a or an apple? So we kind of come to the solution that it's an apple, right? Or can I have cheese? So we have a look at the word cheese. Is it countable or uncountable? So if it's uncountable, can we use a? If it's countable, or plural or singular, right? So we're kind of talking through this problem with our students and find the solution, right?
Yeah, and we're helping them think about how they think and think about how they learn. And that's really important because it's making them more autonomous in their learning and in making them reflect on how they learn, which is really, really important. And in focusing on errors is a great way to do that. This is, the guided approach to error correction. And Josh and I did a webinar on this a couple of weeks ago, and it spoke about this along with other guided approaches to error correction. If you want to have a look at other ways to do error correction, go check out that webinar as well, which you can find on YouTube.
And of course, teaching vocabulary, right? So again, teaching vocabulary is really similar to teaching grammar in the way we teach it. So it's really important that we teach vocabulary explicitly, because again, as we said before, our dyslexic students have smaller capacity of their phonological short-term memory. So when they acquire new vocabulary, it's important to not to overload them with new words. So it should be around 6-8 words maximum per lesson. Our students cannot learn implicitly from listening or reading. So it should be given explicitly, as I said before. Then we practice the words again. We practice the words extensively. So we give number of exercises, right, for our students to learn the new words. Then again, during a lesson, we should provide frequent revision practice, right? So our students should encounter the new words on several occasions. Again, multisensory teaching. So we activate different channels, auditory, visual, kinesthetic. Again, we use flashcards, pictures, illustrations. We can draw attention of our students to the pictures in the books, right, in the course books that are usually somehow they accompany the text in the course books. Mind maps. As for the kinesthetic channel, we can use the exercise of tracing words, right? Depending, again, on the age. We can also ask our students to trace the word, I don't know, in the air, or tapping syllables, right? We can use our hands, so to like the fingers, right? To remember the quantity of syllables we have in a word, right?
Helps with correct stress as well with those longer words, and getting the stress on the correct syllable.
And that's all kinesthetic channel, right? So we might also use these techniques without knowing what they're called, but actually it's really helpful to use gestures, right? In teaching. Then again, it's really important to present words in context, not in isolation, right? To show the relation, because it's easier to remember when the information is somehow connected to particular situation rather than just a word on a piece of paper, right? Not presented in a sentence. And again, also here we can use interactive games to practice vocabulary, right? So they're all accessible. And for example, we can also make a lesson when our students are allowed to use their smartphones in a lesson using different apps. And it all depends, of course, on the teacher. I wanted to show you an exercise on choosing, on using, well, here I use the mind map. So to do an exercise, it's like we try to check the mistakes, right? The mistakes, or check the exercise after students worked on their own or in pairs. And here, next to each verbs, our students were supposed to write the part of the body they use. So, for example, they bounce with hands, they shout with their mouths. So rather than again asking students to maybe reading through the exercise, we can use mind maps. So in this circle, in the center, right, of the circle, we can write the necessary part, and then ask our students to associate the part of the body with the right verb, right? So hands, we can bounce, we can carry, we can push, right? We can also ask them to add their own verbs, right? It's also some good revision practice for in a lesson.
I think this is a great way, you know, also with things like with phrasal verbs, we can put the phrasal verb in the middle and the different kind of context you can use it in. So get over an illness, get over a relationship. You can use in many different ways to kind of get these collocations.
Absolutely, yes. And I also wanted to show you how to use multisensory techniques in teaching vocabulary. So we know that sometimes it's difficult to fish out longer sentences from our students, longer answers. So that is how we can also build on extensive, right, answers for our students. So what do you like? I like ice cream. So we can use questions, right, to enlarge these sentences by asking WH questions, for example. So what kind of ice cream? We say strawberry. So let's make this sentence longer. So I like strawberry ice cream. So when do you eat ice cream? So I eat ice cream in the afternoon. So notice we kind of push, right, our students to give us answer by giving them like backup questions. So they get used to, right? They get used to giving longer answers, right? So especially with the questions when, because at some level, starting from A2, B1, we need to already use a lot of adverbs, right? Frequency, adverbs of time, adverbs of manner, right? Like how. Then we need to justify our answers, like why. So the why, because why question is really important. So because it's, and with the help of these questions, we can kind of motivate our students to give longer answers, right?
And condition them, you know, sometimes we do need to condition students to give these longer answers, you know, if they're doing kind of, I guess, exam preparation.
That's true. So here, as you see, we can use it for speaking. We can also use the same technique for writing, because as we know, the word count becomes important starting from the A2, B1 level. So our students have to write longer sentences, and when they are really short of ideas, what we can do is, instead of working on the quantity of sentences, we can work on the quality of our sentences, right? So the boy jumped. So how, again, here we give this, the adverb, right, of how, right? So we ask how, very high. Again, we can use mind maps with the word jump. So how we can jump high, we can jump, any other ideas, maybe not with this verb. So we can also give some practice of remembering different adverbs that go with the right verb, right? Then we can also add adjectives before nouns, right? So what kind of boy? The tall boy jumped, right? We can also use adjectives describing clothes, things, and it already makes our sentences more interesting, right? And adds word to the piece of writing. So when did the boy jump? He jumped very high today, right? So you see, the tall boy jumped very high today. So you see how our sentence expands already. Where, why, again, to help our students to build longer answers, right?
And the more we do this kind of gentle pushing, the more they'll get used to extending their own production, be it spoken or written.
That's true.
Great. So, in conclusion to some of the stuff that we've touched on today, I would say it's important to include explicit explanations of grammar, vocabulary, and pronunciation features. Just make it very, very clear, you know, the objectives of what's happening and why. I think all learners really appreciate that. Repeat directions and check understanding. And that repetition of directions might come in a different form. So if you've given them orally, maybe write them down. If you're checking understanding by asking a question, you can also check it by asking them to draw a picture or give you some kind of physical response. Present new vocabulary in small chunks to reduce a kind of overload there with learning new information. Use different drill activities to help students reach automaticity. This could be in the form of the pronunciation drills. Use color coding to teach grammar structures. I think this is, you know, a great one. And we, you know, once we start it with them, it's going to be a little bit difficult for them to remember the color codes. But if you decide on those color codes together as a class, as Julia was suggesting, they're much more likely to remember, and you know, keep them there on the wall, and they'll soon get used to using those color codes when they're learning new grammar structures. And try to use multisensory activities to help students make connections and learn concepts. So it's all about, you know, accessing all of those different channels there for these learners, for all of our learners. I think, you know, we've touched on Just a few things that you can go into with dyslexic learners. There's lots of other things that we'd like to go into in more depth, and we'll be doing that in the new year with a couple more webinars on dyslexia. What kind of things might those look into, Julia?
Sorry, again, please, if there was some.
What are some of the other things that we haven't touched on yet? We think about dyslexic students.
Well, we can talk about the physical classroom, right? We can talk about assessment, giving feedback. There are a lot of topics we could touch upon. We could also look at some ideas of how to teach certain, for example, we can talk about teaching pronunciation.
Yeah, I think that's a huge topic. It makes a big difference for these learners. Yeah.
I would say, there are a lot of things we could talk about in the future, but maybe something what our teachers want to talk about. They could ask a particular topic to talk about.
Yeah. Do let us know if you have anything in particular that you want to touch on. It maybe with students with certain learning difficulties or any other topics at all. You can let us know now in the Q&A, or reach out to us via mail and give us those suggestions there. Thank you for your participation today. Do look out for the handout and the certificate that will be arriving to you via formazione@mlaworld.com. Next week, we have our final webinar of the year, and that will be on Christmas in the English classroom. So there'll be lots of materials there that you can take away and use in your classroom the following week, which is, of course, the last week of school for this year. Thank you once again for your participation. Thank you, Julia, for joining us, and have a great evening. Goodbye.